The crystal spires of Station Meridian flickered like dying candles against the black void. Each pulse of light grew weaker as the ancient power cores struggled to maintain the shield generators. Outside the massive windows, the last few hundred, ships of the Galactic Council hung in space like broken toys scattered by an angry child. Commander Vel pressed her crystalline palm against the cold metal wall and felt the vibrations of another shield failure. The Althari had built this station 3,000 years ago, when their civilization ruled half the galaxy. Now she was watching it die along with everything else they had ever created. The tactical display showed the truth in cold numbers. 10,000 Devourer bioships crawled across the star map like a living cancer. Each vessel was the size of a city and grew larger with every world it consumed. They had started as simple creatures no bigger than asteroids, but now some of the eldest bioconstructs stretched for dozens of kilometers. Their hulls rippled with stolen technology from 100 dead civilizations. Dr. Nix floated beside the display, his energy-based form flickering with stress patterns. The Lumen scientist had been tracking the Devourer advance for 3 cycles, watching helplessly as they adapted to every weapon the Council threw at them. Plasma cannons that could crack moons bounced off their living hulls. Quantum disruptors that could tear apart matter itself were absorbed and turned into new organ systems. "The Vanguard will reach us in 6 hours," Nix reported, his voice carrying the electronic harmonics of his species. "The main fleet follows 12 hours behind that." Vel nodded and turned to face the other survivors in the command center. Representatives from 23 species clustered around holographic displays, their faces showing the same hopeless expression, regardless of how many eyes or limbs they possessed. The cybernetic Nexari had stopped their constant data streaming. The hive-minded collective had gone silent for the first time in recorded history. Even the proud warrior clans of the Karathi had laid down their ceremonial weapons. "Status report from all sectors," Vel commanded, though she already knew what they would say. The answers came in a dozen different languages, but they all meant the same thing. Weapons depleted, shields failing, hull breaches spreading, the great Station Meridian, once the crown jewel of galactic civilization, was dying section by section. Fleet Commander Rex of the Nexari stepped forward, his mechanical body sparking from battle damage. Half his face had been replaced with emergency repairs after the last Devourer assault. "My remaining ships can hold formation for perhaps 2 hours of combat. After that, we will be reduced to ramming attacks." The Karathi war leader Brack slammed, his 4 fists on the table. "Then we ram them with honor. Better to die fighting than to be consumed like cattle." "Honor won't save the children in the civilian sections," snapped Dr. Nix. His energy form flared brighter with emotion. "We have 40,000 refugees aboard this station. Families from every world the Devourers have touched. If we fall, they all become part of that thing out there." Through the observation ports, they could see the enemy approaching. The bioships moved with unnatural grace, their living hulls pulsing with bioluminescent patterns, tentacles the size of battleships writhed from their undersides, tasting space for new prey. Some had grown massive eyes that tracked the movements of the defending fleet. Others sprouted weapon ports that glowed with the stolen fire of dead suns. Vel remembered when the Council first encountered the Devourers. They had seemed like just another spacefaring species, perhaps a bit more aggressive than most. The initial diplomatic contact had gone well. The creatures were curious about galactic civilization and eager to learn about advanced technology. It wasn't until entire colonies started going silent that anyone realized the truth. The Devourers didn't just conquer worlds, they consumed them completely. Every living thing, every manufactured object, every accumulated bit of knowledge became part of their growing mass. They turned planets into bioship nurseries and civilizations into organ systems. What had started as a few dozen creatures had become a plague that devoured everything in its path. "We could try the Nexus protocol one more time," suggested Chief Engineer Kale. The young Althari's crystal form had dimmed with exhaustion from 3 days of continuous repairs. "If we overload the station's main reactor, the explosion might take out their vanguard." Rex shook his mechanical head. "They've seen that trick before. The bioships from the Helix sector integrated radiation shielding after we destroyed their probe fleet that way. They adapt too quickly." "Then what do you suggest?" Vel asked, though she knew no one had answers left to give. The War Council fell silent. Outside, another section of the station's shields flickered and died. Emergency lights bathed the command, center in red, making everyone look like they were already bleeding. Vel thought about the message they had sent 3 days ago, broadcast on every frequency to every corner of the galaxy. A simple plea for help, sent to any civilization that might still have the strength to fight. So far, only silence had answered. The few remaining independent worlds were either too weak to help or too far away to arrive in time. The Althari commander moved to the central display and pulled up the tactical overview one more time. 217 ships remained from the once mighty Council fleet. Most were damaged beyond full combat capability. They faced an enemy that had consumed the combined military might of the galaxy's greatest civilizations and grown stronger. With each victory, "All ships," she broadcast on the fleet-wide channel. "This is Commander Vel. Prepare for final battle formation. We will buy the civilians as much time as possible." The responses came back immediately. Battered Nexari cruisers acknowledged orders with mechanical precision. Karathi raiders howled battle cries that echoed through their comm systems. Lumen energy ships pulsed in acknowledgement like living stars. They all knew it was suicide. Right, math was simple and brutal. But sometimes, when everything else had failed, courage was the only thing left to offer. Vel sealed her combat suit and checked her weapon one last time. In 6 hours, the Devourer Vanguard would arrive. In 18 hours, the main fleet would finish what remained. The last free beings in the galaxy would make their stand here, above a dying star, with nothing but determination and the fading hope that their sacrifice might mean something. The crystal spires of Station Meridian pulsed once more, gathering power for the final battle. In the depths of space, 10,000 nightmares crawled closer, hungry for the feast that awaited them. The sensor array deep in Station Meridian's lower sections had been built to detect threats from across the galaxy. Now it screamed warnings that made no sense. Senior analyst Tara of the Nexari stood before banks of displays that showed impossible readings, her cybernetic implants struggling to process the data streams. Something massive was moving through the galactic rim, a region of space that had been empty for longer than most civilizations had existed. The readings suggested an object larger than any known ship, traveling at speeds that should have torn apart any constructed vessel. But the most disturbing part wasn't its size or speed. It was the energy signature. The object was made of metal, simple, primitive metal. "This has to be a sensor malfunction," muttered Engineer Pete from the Althari repair crews. His crystal form flickered with confusion as he ran diagnostics on the equipment. Nothing made of basic alloys could survive those speeds. The hull, stress alone would turn it into plasma. Tara's mechanical fingers clicked across her control panels, cross-referencing the readings with every database in the Council archives. The pattern was unlike anything in 50,000 years of recorded galactic history. Energy weapons that operated on unknown principles, propulsion systems that seemed to ignore half the laws of physics, hull construction that made no sense, according to everything they knew about material science. "Could it be another Devourer variant?" asked Dr. Nix, his energy form materializing beside the sensor station. The Lumen scientist had abandoned his post in the upper levels to investigate the anomaly personally. "No," Tara replied, her voice carrying the electronic harmonics of her species. The Devourers grow their ships from living tissue. This thing is completely artificial. Look at these structural scans. The display showed a kilometer-long wedge of metal bristling with weapon systems. Every surface was covered in sensors, communications arrays, and devices that defied classification. The design was brutal and efficient, with no wasted space for comfort or aesthetics. It looked like it had been built for one purpose: war. The design philosophy is completely alien, Dr. Nix observed, his form pulsing with scientific curiosity, despite their desperate situation. Most civilizations develop ships that reflect their cultural values. Althari vessels emphasize harmony and balance. Nexari constructs prioritize efficiency and logic. This thing looks like it was designed by predators. Engineer Pete accessed his personal databanks, searching through millennia of archaeological records. Wait, I'm seeing something. In the old archives, references to a species that once traveled between stars before the current galactic order was established. The myths about the violent ones? Tara asked. Every spacefaring civilization had legends about a warrior race that had supposedly vanished into the deep dark long ago. Most scholars dismissed them as folklore, stories told to frighten young beings into following proper diplomatic protocols. They weren't myths, Pete said quietly, his crystal form dimming with the weight of ancient knowledge. The archaeological evidence is scattered and incomplete, but the pattern is clear. A bipedal species that spread across dozens of star systems before disappearing. They left behind ruins on dead worlds, battle sites where they fought something that consumed entire planets. Dr. Nix's energy pattern shifted to display complex calculations. If such a species existed, where have they been for the last 30,000 years? Why return now? The sensor displays flickered as the mysterious object changed course, adjusting its trajectory with precision that suggested active guidance. It was heading directly for their position, but not in an intercept pattern. Instead, it appeared to be positioning itself between Station Meridian and the approaching Devourer fleet. It knows about the battle, Tara realized. Somehow it's aware of what's happening here. Alarms began blaring throughout the sensor section as new contacts appeared on the displays. The object wasn't alone. Dozens of similar energy signatures were emerging from empty space, as if they had been hiding in the void itself. Each new arrival showed the same impossible characteristics: metal construction, unknown weapon systems, and propulsion technology that shouldn't exist. How many? Dr. Nix asked, though his tone suggested he wasn't sure he wanted to know the answer. 47 ships so far, Tara reported, her cybernetic implants processing the flood of data. All showing similar design patterns. They're arranging themselves in a battle formation that I don't recognize from any tactical database. The largest vessel, the one they had detected first, was broadcasting something on multiple frequencies. The signal was encrypted using mathematical principles that predated the current galactic communication protocols. Even the most advanced translation programs couldn't make sense of it. They're trying to communicate, Engineer Pete observed, but the language base is completely unknown. It's like they're using a linguistic structure that evolved separately from everything else in the galaxy. Through the station's observation ports, crew members began reporting visual confirmation of the mysterious fleet. The ships were visible, now as points of light against the star field, their hulls reflecting the light of distant suns. They moved with coordination that suggested extensive combat experience, taking positions that maximized their firepower while minimizing their exposure. To return fire. Commander Vell needs to see this, Dr. Nix said, already transmitting the sensor data to the station's command center. Whatever these things are, they're about to encounter the Devourer Vanguard. Tara pulled up a tactical projection showing the positions of all three fleets. The mysterious newcomers had placed themselves directly in the path of the advancing bioships. In less than 2 hours, they would make contact with the Devourer scouts. The positioning was perfect for an intercept. but it was also perfect for getting destroyed by overwhelming numbers. "They can't possibly win," Engineer Pete said, his crystal form flickering with concern. "Even if their weapons are more advanced than ours, they're still outnumbered 200 to 1. "Maybe they don't intend to win," Dr. Nick suggested. "Maybe they're just buying us time to evacuate the civilians." Tara studied the formation of the unknown fleet, her cybernetic brain analyzing their tactical deployment. Something about their positioning seemed familiar, like an echo of ancient strategies, recorded in the deepest archives. These weren't the movements of desperate defenders making a heroic last stand. They were the measured preparations of experienced hunters preparing to eliminate prey. "No," she said slowly, her mechanical voice carrying a note of dawning realization. "I don't think they're here to delay the Devourers. I think they're here to destroy them." The sensor displays pulsed with new data as the lead vessel's energy signature spiked dramatically. Whatever weapons it carried were powering up, drawing energy from reactor systems that shouldn't fit inside a hull that size. The readings suggested destructive potential that exceeded anything in the Council's arsenal. "Impossible," Engineer Pete whispered. "No ship that size could generate that much firepower without tearing itself apart." But the readings didn't lie. The mysterious fleet was preparing for battle with weapons that operated on principles the galaxy's greatest scientists couldn't understand. In the deep, dark between stars, something had been waiting for this moment. Something that remembered. How to fight monsters. The sensor array screamed one final warning as the lead vessel's weapons reached full charge. Whatever was about to happen would either save them all or destroy everything they had left to protect. Space itself seemed to tear apart as the human warship Defiance dropped out of its impossible transit. Reality rippled around the massive vessel like water disturbed by a falling stone. The ship's hull was a kilometer of gunmetal gray that caught no reflection from nearby stars. Every surface bristled with weapons that had no equivalent in any galactic database. The bridge of the Defiance was a study in brutal efficiency. No elegant curves or artistic flourishes decorated the command center. Banks of tactical displays showed target acquisition data while weapons officers prepared firing solutions with the calm precision of experienced killers. The air hummed with the barely contained power of reactor systems that pushed the boundaries of known physics. Blake stood before the main tactical display, his weathered face illuminated by the red glow of combat lighting. The human had spent 30 years in the void, leading the scattered remnants of his species through battles that the galaxy would never know were fought. His uniform bore no decorations or rank insignia. The scars on his hands and the lines around his eyes were the only medals he needed. "Tactical assessment," he ordered, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had commanded ships through 100 desperate battles. 10,000 Devourer bioconstructs arranged in a standard consumption formation, reported Lieutenant Sarah from the weapons station. Her cybernetic eye interfaced directly with the targeting computers, processing threat data faster than any organic brain could manage. "Vanguard units are already engaging the Council's defensive fleet. Main force is holding position 12 light minutes out." Blake studied the tactical display with the eye of a predator evaluating prey. The Devourer formation was perfect for overwhelming static defenses, but it left their command ships exposed to concentrated fire. The bioconstructs moved with organic grace, their living hulls rippling as they prepared to feed on the station's defenders. "They've grown since the last encounter," observed Commander Torres from the communications station. The older human's face bore ritual scars from the outer colony wars, marks that told the story of humanity's long exile in the dark. "Some of those bioships are the size of small moons." "Size won't save them," Blake replied. He turned to address the bridge crew, each face showing the same grim determination. 30 years ago, they drove us from our homes. They called us primitive, violent, unfit for civilized space. Today, we show them what those words really mean. The main display shifted to show the approaching Devourer vanguard. Hundreds of bioships moved like a living tide, their hulls pulsing with bioluminescent patterns that spoke of hunger and ancient malice. Tentacles the size of battleships writhed from their undersides, while weapon ports glowed with stolen fire from a dozen conquered civilizations. Blake activated the ship-wide communication system. His words would be heard by every human aboard. The Defiance, men and women who had chosen exile over surrender, war over peace. All hands, this is your captain. For 3 decades, we have prepared for this moment. Every battle we fought in the void, every ship we built in secret, every life we lost in the darkness, it all led here. The Devourer scouts detected the human vessel and immediately began adapting their formation. Bioships that had been moving in loose swarms suddenly tightened into attack formations, their living hulls growing new weapon systems with disturbing speed. They had learned from previous encounters with galactic military forces and were prepared for conventional tactics. They're generating plasma lance arrays, Lieutenant Sarah reported. Her cybernetic implants processed the bioship's rapid evolution in real time. Quantum disruptors forming along their dorsal ridges. They're adapting to counter every weapon system in the Council database. Blake smiled for the first time since the battle began. It was not a pleasant expression. Good. Let them prepare. For yesterday's war. The Defiance moved forward with deadly purpose, its hull cutting through space like a blade through flesh. The ship's design was a masterpiece of human engineering, every system optimized for destruction. Armor plating that could absorb energy weapons while redirecting kinetic impacts. Reactor cores that burned with the fury of dying stars. Weapons that operated on principles the galaxy had forgotten or never learned. All batteries, target the lead bioconstruct, Blake commanded. Maximum power. Let's announce our presence. The first salvo from the Defiance lit up space with energies that had no name in galactic science. Kinetic cannons fired projectiles at significant fractions of light speed, each round carrying more destructive force than a planetary bombardment. Fusion torpedoes streaked through the void like miniature suns, their warheads designed to turn matter itself into weapons. The lead Devourer bioship, a creature the size of a city that had consumed 3 star systems, simply ceased to exist. The combined firepower tore through its adaptive hull defenses and vaporized its core structure in microseconds. The explosion sent shockwaves through the surrounding bioconstructs, their living hulls recoiling from energies they couldn't absorb or redirect. Target destroyed, Lieutenant Sarah reported with professional calm. Secondary explosions detected in the surrounding formation. They're attempting to adapt to our weapons. But adaptation took time, and time was something the Devourers would not be given. The Defiance continued its advance, weapons systems cycling through firing patterns that had been perfected in battles against horrors that made the bioships look like children's toys. Each shot was precisely targeted to exploit weaknesses that human tactical computers had identified through decades of combat analysis. Blake watched the tactical display as more bioships died under his guns. The Devourers were trying to swarm, his vessel surrounding it with hundreds of smaller constructs while the larger ones adapted new defenses. It was a sound strategy that had worked against every other species they had encountered. They don't understand, he said quietly, speaking to himself as much as his crew. They think we're just another galactic civilization with advanced weapons. They don't realize what we really are. The bioships pressed their attack with renewed fury, launching organic projectiles that could pierce Althari crystal hulls and energy discharges that could overload Nexari shields. Their living weapons writhed through space like angry serpents, seeking the human vessel's weak points. The attacks struck the Defiance's hull and dissipated harmlessly against armor that had been forged in the crucibles of necessity. Human defensive systems didn't rely on shields or energy barriers. They used simple, brutal physics, layers of reactive armor that turned incoming attacks into scattered particles, point defense arrays that created walls of destructive fire. and hull plating that could absorb punishment that would cripple lesser vessels. "Damage report," Blake requested, though he already knew the answer. "Minor scoring on outer hull sections," reported Chief Engineer Max from his station deep in the ship's armored core. "All systems operating at full capacity. Request permission. To increase reactor output to combat maximum. Granted. All weapons continuous fire. Target the command bioconstructs." The Defiance transformed into a moving storm of destruction, its weapons systems firing in synchronized patterns that turned space itself into a killing field. Each shot was calculated to maximize damage while minimizing the bioship's ability to adapt. The humans had learned that overwhelming force applied quickly was the only way to prevent their enemies from evolving countermeasures. Blake keyed the communication system one more time, broadcasting on frequencies that would reach both the dying Council fleet and the approaching Devourer Armada. His message was simple, carrying 30 years of pain and determination in every word. "This is humanity. We have returned to settle old debts." The death of a Devourer bioship was not like the destruction of a normal vessel. When the Defiance's weapons tore through their living hulls, the creatures screamed across multiple spectrums of energy. Their death cries rippled through space, carrying information to their surviving siblings about the nature of the weapons that had killed them. The remaining bioconstructs began to change. Their hulls rippled and reformed, growing new types of armor that could deflect kinetic impacts. Weapon ports shifted and multiplied as they prepared to counter the human vessel's devastating firepower. The adaptive nature that had made them, unstoppable against every other species, now worked overtime to find a weakness in humanity's war machine. Blake watched the evolution process with the calm attention of a scientist observing a laboratory experiment. The Devourers were following predictable patterns, responding to each weapon system with biological countermeasures. They had done this successfully against Althari crystal cannons and Nexari plasma arrays. But human weapons were different in ways that made adaptation a liability rather than an advantage. "They're reinforcing their primary hulls against kinetic penetration," Lieutenant Sarah reported from her weapons station. Her cybernetic eye tracked the bioship's rapid changes with mechanical precision. "Estimated 70% reduction in effectiveness for conventional railgun rounds. Switch to fragmentation warheads," Blake ordered. "Let them armor against solid shot while we fill them with shrapnel." The Defiance's weapons systems cycled to new ammunition types without missing a firing sequence. Kinetic rounds that had been designed to punch through solid barriers were replaced with projectiles that exploded into thousands of high-velocity fragments. The bioship's reinforced hulls, perfect for stopping conventional penetrators, became death traps as metal fragments ricocheted through their internal structures. 3 more Devourer constructs died in explosions of organic matter and stolen technology. Their deaths transmitted new tactical data to the swarm, which immediately began developing countermeasures to the fragmentation attacks. Compartmentalized hull sections formed to contain explosions. Internal barriers grew to limit damage from scattered projectiles. "Energy discharge building in Sector 7, reported Tactical Officer Reed from his console. The young human's fingers danced across control interfaces that would have baffled the galaxy's finest engineers. "Multiple bioships are combining their power outputs. They're preparing some kind of coordinated attack." Blake studied the tactical display as dozens of bioconstructs aligned themselves into a precise formation. Energy discharges that could crack planets began building between them, creating a web of destructive force that focused on the human vessel's position. It was a desperate strategy that would consume half the attacking swarm, but it might be enough to overwhelm even the Defiance's defenses. "Evasive maneuvers," Blake commanded. "Emergency acceleration, pattern Delta 7. The human warship moved with an agility that defied its massive size. Reaction engines that operated on principles of controlled antimatter annihilation pushed the vessel through space at accelerations that would have liquefied the crew of any other ship. But humans had learned to build their vessels as extensions of themselves, machines that could endure punishment and keep fighting. The Devourer energy. Attack lanced through the space where the Defiance had been moments before. The concentrated discharge was powerful enough to sterilize entire star systems. But it struck empty void while the human vessel repositioned for a counterattack. The bioships had committed their most powerful weapons to a single coordinated strike and left themselves vulnerable to retaliation. "All forward batteries full spread," Blake ordered. "Punish them for that mistake." The Defiance unleashed a storm of destruction that would have shattered conventional fleets. Fusion torpedoes streaked through space like falling stars, each one carrying enough destructive force to level continents. Energy weapons that operated on theoretical principles carved through bioship hulls with surgical precision. Kinetic. Cannons fired streams of projectiles that turned space itself into a maze of death. The Devourer formation disintegrated under the human assault. Bioships that had survived the consumption of entire civilizations died in seconds, their adaptive hulls unable to cope with weapons that changed tactics faster than biology could evolve. The survivors scattered in confusion, their coordination broken by losses they couldn't quickly replace. But the victory was temporary. Space around the battle zone began to tear as more Devourer vessels dropped out of faster-than-light travel. The main fleet had arrived ahead of schedule, drawn by the distress signals of their dying scouts. Thousands of bioconstructs, some the size of moons, emerged from the void with hulls that already showed adaptations to human weapons. "Contact bearing 37 Mark II, Lieutenant Sarah announced, her voice tight with controlled tension. "Bioship classification Omega class, estimated mass equivalent to a small planet. It's generating energy readings that exceed our weapons. Maximum output." Blake studied the massive creature that dominated his tactical display. This was one of the eldest Devourer constructs, a bioship that had consumed entire star systems and integrated their technologies into its living hull. Its surface crawled with weapon ports that glowed with stolen fire from 100 dead civilizations. Tentacles the size of capital ships writhed around its bulk, each one tipped with devices that could crack worlds. "Sir," came Chief Engineer Max's voice from the ship's depths. "I'm reading massive energy buildups throughout the enemy fleet. They're preparing for coordinated bombardment. Even our armor won't stand up to that much firepower." For a moment, the bridge fell silent. The Defiance had fought impossible odds before, but this was beyond even human stubbornness. The math was simple and brutal. One ship against thousands, with the largest bioconstruct capable of destroying them with a single focused attack. Blake activated the emergency communication array, broadcasting on frequencies that had been reserved for humanity's darkest hour. The message was short and carried across multiple star systems simultaneously, 3 words that would either save them or serve as their epitaph. "Execute Iron Symphony." Space around the battle zone began to tear in dozens of locations as human. Ships dropped out of faster-than-light travel. They came not as a fleet, but as a swarm of predators converging on prey. Each vessel bore the scars of humanity's long exile, weapons tested in battles that the galaxy never knew were fought. Destroyers, with hulls blackened by plasma fire, cruisers that bristled with experimental weapons, dreadnoughts that carried enough firepower to sterilize star systems. Admiral Torres appeared on the main display from her flagship Retribution, a massive vessel that dwarfed even the Defiance. Her face showed the same grim determination that had sustained humanity through 3 decades of exile and preparation. Behind her, banks of tactical displays showed the positions of over 300 human warships. "Iron Symphony is in position," she reported with military precision. "All units report ready for engagement. Blake, you've done well holding them here. Now let's finish this properly." The human fleet arranged itself around the Devourer armada, with movements that spoke of extensive training and bitter experience. Each ship took position to maximize their combined firepower while minimizing the bioconstruct's ability to concentrate their attacks. It was a formation that had been practiced in the void between stars, perfected through battles against horrors that made the devourers look like children's toys. Blake keyed the fleet-wide communication system, his words reaching every human vessel in the battle zone. All ships. This is Admiral Blake. 30 years ago, they drove us from our homes and called us unfit for civilized space. Today, we show them what civilization really looks like when it decides to survive. The Iron Symphony began with a single note of destruction that echoed across the battlefield. 300 human vessels opened fire simultaneously, their weapons creating a storm of energy and metal that turned space itself into a killing field. The bioships found themselves facing not just superior firepower, but tactical coordination that operated on levels they couldn't comprehend. The galaxy's age of terror was about to end, not with words or diplomacy, but with the simple human truth that some things were worth fighting for. The battle that followed would be remembered as the moment the galaxy learned to fear something other than the devourers. Human ships moved through space like wolves hunting sheep, their weapons systems firing in coordination patterns that turned the void into a maze of destruction. Each vessel fought with a brutality that shocked even the war-weary survivors of the Council fleet. The massive Omega-class bioconstruct, the eldest and most powerful of the Devourer vessels, found itself facing Admiral Torres's flagship Retribution. The bioship's hull stretched across dozens of kilometers, its surface crawling with weapon ports that had consumed the military technology of entire civilizations. But when it fired its planet-killing energy discharge, the human dreadnought simply absorbed the blast and kept coming. Torres stood on her bridge, watching the tactical displays with the calm attention of someone who had fought larger monsters. In darker places, the Retribution's hull glowed white-hot from the bioship's attack, but the vessel's armor held. Human engineering had learned to build ships that could endure punishment that would vaporize lesser vessels. "All forward batteries, maximum yield," she ordered. "Show this thing what real firepower looks like." The Retribution's main guns spoke, with voices that could crack worlds. Each shot carried more destructive force than anything in the Council's arsenal, energies that had been refined through decades of fighting horrors in the deep dark. The bioconstruct's adaptive hull tried to deflect the incoming fire, but human weapons operated on principles that made adaptation meaningless. The Omega-class creature died slowly, its massive bulk breaking apart in sections as human fire tore through systems that had consumed star systems. Its death scream echoed across multiple spectrums, carrying the terror of something that had never before encountered a predator it couldn't consume. Throughout the battle zone, smaller human vessels hunted bioships with methodical precision. Destroyers armed with experimental weapons tracked down fleeing scouts. Cruisers worked in coordinated groups to overwhelm larger constructs. Each engagement followed the same pattern: swift attack, overwhelming firepower, total destruction of the target. But the humans didn't just fight the devourers. While their military vessels systematically annihilated the bioship swarm, medical ships were already approaching Station Meridian. Human doctors and engineers moved through the damaged station with practiced efficiency, treating wounded Council personnel and repairing critical systems. Commander Vel of the Althari watched in amazement as human medics worked alongside her own people. These were the same species that the Council had dismissed as too violent for civilized space, yet they showed more compassion in their actions than most diplomatic delegations managed in years of negotiation. Dr. Emma Ross, the lead human medical officer, knelt beside a wounded Nexari engineer whose cybernetic systems had been damaged in the battle. Her hands moved with surgical precision as she repaired connections that Althari healers couldn't understand. "You're going to be fine," she said quietly, her voice carrying genuine concern. "We've dealt with worse injuries than this." The wounded Nexari looked up at her with optical sensors that flickered with confusion and gratitude. "Why are you helping us? After what the Council did to your people?" Dr. Ross paused in her work, her expression growing distant for a moment. "Because that's what humans do. We fight monsters so that others don't have to. Even if those others once called us monsters themselves." On the bridge of the Defiance, Blake received reports from across the battle zone. The Devourer fleet was collapsing under sustained human attack, their bioships dying faster than they could adapt. Some of the creatures attempted to flee, but human pursuit vessels tracked them down with ruthless efficiency. No bioconstruct would escape to rebuild the swarm elsewhere. "Final count?" Blake asked Lieutenant Sarah, though he already knew the answer from watching the tactical displays. "All Devourer vessels destroyed or disabled," she reported with professional satisfaction. "Total enemy casualties: 10,372 bioconstructs. Human losses: 0 vessels destroyed, 17 ships with minor damage." Blake nodded and opened communication channels to both his fleet and the Council survivors. His words would be transmitted across the galaxy, carrying a message that would reshape how civilizations viewed the balance of power among the stars. "This is Admiral Blake of the Terran Imperial Navy. The Devourer threat has been eliminated. All bioconstructs in this system have been destroyed. Station Meridian is secure." He paused, letting the weight of those words settle across the communication channels before continuing. "To the survivors of the Galactic Council, your people fought bravely against impossible odds. Your sacrifice bought time for others to escape, and that courage will not be forgotten." The response came immediately from Commander Vell aboard the Aya station. Her crystalline voice carried emotions that her species rarely showed in public. "Admiral Blake, on behalf of the Council, we thank you for your intervention. But we must ask, where has humanity been? We searched for your people for decades after the exile. Many believed you had been destroyed." Blake's expression hardened, lines deepening around his eyes as he remembered years of struggle in the void between stars. "We went where you sent us, Commander, into the dark spaces where civilized beings fear to travel. We found things there. Things that make the Devourers look like simple predators." He gestured to his tactical officer, who transmitted a data package to the Council's computers. The information contained images and sensor readings from humanity's long exile, battles against creatures that defied classification, encounters with ancient intelligences that had been sleeping in the void, evidence of threats that could consume entire galaxies if left unchecked. "While you built your perfect civilization in the inner systems, we became the guardians of the outer dark," Blake continued. "Every nightmare that crawled out of dead space, every ancient horror that stirred in forgotten nebulae, every world killer that thought it could feast on the galaxy, we fought them all. We lost ships, we lost colonies, we lost friends. But we kept fighting because someone had to." The communication channel fell silent as Council representatives absorbed the implications of Blake's words. The human fleet had not been hiding or rebuilding during their exile. They had been at war with threats that the galaxy never knew existed. Admiral Torres's voice joined the conversation from her flagship. The Devourers were just the latest in a long line of predators that see civilized space as a feeding ground. They won't be the last. But now you know something important. Humanity remembers its promises. Dr. Nix materialized near one of Station Meridian's communication arrays, his energy form pulsing with scientific curiosity despite the recent terror. "What promises?" he asked. Blake's response carried the weight of 30 years of bitter experience. Before the exile, humanity made a simple offer to the Galactic Council. We would serve as your military arm, protecting civilization from the threats that democracy and diplomacy couldn't handle. In exchange, we asked only for recognition as equals among the galactic community. The memory of that rejection still burned in every human present. The Council had been horrified by humanity's military capabilities, their willingness to use overwhelming force against existential threats. They had called humans too violent, too unpredictable, too dangerous to be trusted with the responsibility of galactic defense. "You chose to exile us rather than accept our help," Blake continued, his voice carrying no anger, only fact. "So we made a new promise. We would protect the galaxy anyway. From the shadows, from the void, from the places where light never reaches. Because that's what humans do. We keep our word, even when others break theirs." Commander Vell's response came slowly, weighted with the realization of what her people had lost through their fear of human violence. "And now?" "Now the galaxy has a choice," Admiral Torres answered from her bridge. "You can continue to fear us, to see our strength as a threat rather than a shield. Or you can accept that sometimes, to protect the innocent, someone has to be willing to be the monster that hunts monsters." Blake looked out at the debris field that had once been the Devourer fleet, then at the intact bulk of Station Meridian, where human medical teams were still treating Council wounded. "We learned something important during our exile. The galaxy doesn't need humanity to be civilized. It needs humanity to be human, to stand between the darkness and the light, no matter the cost." His final words carried across every communication channel, reaching not just the battle survivors but relay stations throughout known space. To any civilization listening to this transmission, the predators who feast on the innocent now have something to fear. Humanity has returned, not as conquerors, but as guardians. We are the nightmare that hunts nightmares, the violence that protects peace, the darkness that preserves light. Blake paused, his weathered face showing the accumulated weight of decades spent fighting horrors in the void. The galaxy is safer now, not because we have eliminated all threats, but because when the next horror emerges from the deep dark, humanity will be there to meet it. This is our promise, our burden, and our choice. The communication ended, leaving behind a galaxy that would never again underestimate the species they had once called too violent for civilized space. In the deep places between stars, other predators felt a new kind of fear. The fear of being hunted by something stronger and more determined than themselves. Station Meridian survived. The Council endured. And in the void between galaxies, humanity took up its eternal watch, standing guard against the darkness that would always hunger for the light.